Siman Lamed Zayin, Tevilas Keilim. We're up to Siv Gimel. And I wasn't here yesterday, so I mentioned that I would explain a svara for the Inyan of Tevilas Keilim. So, Api Pashtas, we bald that the Keilim was in the shus from the Goy, so it required a certain tumah in it. And we know that how do you remove tumah? So, you type, because a mikveh is called a mikveh tara. What's the, there's an interesting concept, a letter someplace from the Rebbe about it, that there was once a lady that was becoming a Giyaitis. And she learned all in preparation to the Gaitis. And they told her that one of the things you have to do by the Gaitis, you have to go to the mikveh, table in the mikveh. So that didn't sit well with her. She didn't see any reason for it. And when she asked the one that was teaching her, what's the reason for it, couldn't really give her an explanation. So she gave her an eitzah that she should write to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And she wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe answered the following, that it could be, the Rebbe's not saying definitely that's what, it could be that we see an interesting thing. When a child is born, so the child, or the uber you want to call it, is wrapped in a placenta. A placenta is what we call in the Gemara the shilya. It's a shilya. And the shilya is full with water. Shasta, a woman has to give birth, we know that the water bursts, because that means that the shilya is cracked, and remember the water coming out, and what follows after that is the baby comes out. So you see that the way the Eibishter created birth in the world, he created it by the embryo being engulfed in water. All in natural water. It's not the water that you turn on a sink and it comes. It's natural. The body produced the water. So he says the Inyan of Gaitis, we have a Gemara that Gershon is Gaia is a cotton shenayla. That a Ger is like a cotton shenayla. But so the Inyan of the mikveh is where you immerse yourself and covered entirely in the water like a rebirth. So it could be also maybe over here by Keilim. Also, the Keilim was connected with Goyim, and now you want to connect it to Yidden. So by putting it into the water, the Keilim is born again and becomes a different Keilim. Could be a svara. Okay, let's look in the Vainik.
Is there a reason to be mechanic between a new Keilim and old Keilim?
Any Keilim, you want to take it out from the tumah of Goyim to the Kedusha of Yisrael. Makes no difference if it's new or old.
I used Keilim from a boy. It needs to be kasher besides between.
That we'll see separate. That's a separate. That is in the pasuk. In the pasuk, Kodav Sheyab Tabiru Beish. But it should be also b'mei mayim. It should be Yoteva. Now he says, so we're going to now that Tefillah applies to metal Keilim and glass Keilim, like we explained it, because in the pasuk where it talks about the Inyan of Tefillah's Keilim, it first talks about kasher in the Keilim, but it talks about metal. It lists a whole bunch of metal, achazov, kesef, that's the lead, all different type of Keilim, and the Chachamim also compared to it zechuchas. Like I explained a number of times, because Keilim is the Keilim, much the metal Keilim, you could repair them. If they get a hole, you could put a patch on the Keilim. Maybe no one does it today, but It's possible. And glass is also a material that's repairable. That we know that with fire, they call blowing the keilim, but they can shape glass whatever way they want. Other things, but now we're going about clay eights. Clay eights means a wooden keilim. There's people that used to make a wooden keilim. They would take the trunk of a tree, and they would cut out a part of it, and became a keilim. So, but over there, you can't repair it. If it gets a hole in it, you can't repair it. You can't shape it or do it like you can with metal or with glass. So he says the kli eitz einem tzrichen tefillah. Wooden kelim don't need tefillah. Ve'im yesh aleim chashukei bazel tzrichen tefillah b'lei bracha. Chashukei bazel means, let's say around the border of the keli, there's some design metal. So it's not really a metal keli, but it has metal attached to it. So that already makes it a little bit like a metal keli, and therefore it says you need tefillah b'lei bracha, because it's not really it's a wooden keli, but it has some ornament on it, but it's a wooden keli. Klei cheres, keli that's made from earthenware, is gam kein ein tzrichen tefillah. They also don't need tefillah. Ve'im mitzupim mibefnim be'ever shekayde graziert tzrichen tefillah b'lei bracha. Now, this means that this I explained it. I will just go over it briefly. When they make a dish, so if it's a kli cheres absorbs. You don't want to eat a dish; it'll always be absorbing. And we have a color, a cheres you can't kasher. Why can't you kasher? Because the halacha says that ein yotzin midei daf yoyla. It doesn't give out. In pasuk shteit cheres by kachim shteit cheres asher tevusha bo yishova. You have to break it because it got absorbed in it, and you can't kasher and get out. So what they do is, years ago, they used to make a glass shell in the keilim. So it was a kli cheres, which was a covering of glass, but the covering of glass was only a covering. It wasn't really a keli in itself. So therefore, it's really a kli cheres. So that's what he says over here, that you need tefillah b'lei bracha. Today, if you go to the store to buy china, so there's a glazing in your china. That's why you see there's like a shine on the dishes. But over there, it's not thick at all. It's a very fine, thin coating of glass. So sometime when you buy keilim, such keilim in a store, they'll ask you, what is your minig? Do you tevel such keilim? Do you not tevel such keilim? Because it's sort of like a machlokes. Or that's why he says that they need b'lei bracha, because there's different opinions about it. So we have a rule: sufik brachas lahakol. V'chein klei porcelain. Porcelain is also like the keilim that we have today, that made from porcelain. It seems from the Kitzur, it seems that there's many different type of keilim today. There's a hard plastic keilim. What's to do with hard plastic keilim? So most people don't tevel plastic keilim. Sometimes you may be someone that's machma, but you don't see them tevel plastic keilim.
There's a reason?
Huh?
There's a reason why, or?
Because it's not from the things that are mentioned in the Torah. It's not officially glass. Even though the Moshe glass Moshe in Hilchos Pesach, could you kasher glass? So then we're talking about glass that was used with hot. glass that was used with cold, like if you have a glass bottle. So there's such a thing known as milu ve'iru. Milu ve'iru means that you fill it up with water, and after 24 hours you pour out the water and fill it up again for 3 days. That's what people have with a wine decanter, that they keep wine in it all year round, and they want to use it for Pesach. So you can kasher it with milu ve'iru. That's a separate thing by cold glass. If you have a hot glass that let's say there's what they call Pyrex. Pyrex is a hot glass that people bake in it. So that you can't kasher for Pesach. Because over there, we give it a din of a kli. The glass gets a din of a kli, and cheres you can't kasher because it doesn't give out, it doesn't spit out. Any yaitz mitofil, or it doesn't give out. So most people don't kasher plastic Keilim. There used to be a thing called melmak, I think it was called. It was also some sort of plastic. Most people don't kasher. Maybe someone wants to be machman, definitely without a bracha. What becomes a shaila about glass, when a real shaila, Moshe, let's say you go to the store and you buy a jar of pickles, okay? And there are people, some more, some less, but there are people that when they empty out a jar, they wash it out and they use it later. They use it to store food in it. People go and buy empty jars in the hardware store. They buy jars. So if you have a jar that you emptied out, so the question is, does that jar of pickles, when it's emptied out and you want to put in it, let's say, applesauce, do you have to title it before you put in the applesauce? Or there's better yet, there's a shaila that they create a shaila, are you allowed to eat from the jar? Because people that, once they open up the jar, they don't empty out the jar and throw it away. They eat from the jar, and then they put it back, so the jar's becoming a container. So does that need tefillah? So the truth is, it's a little bit of a machlokes. I always like to say we're psakim for Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein, called the Igros Moshe, has an interesting chap about the jars. Not everyone agrees with him. There are people that don't agree with that, but he says when you bought a jar of pickles, you didn't buy the jar, but you bought the pickles. But they can't give you the pickles in your hand, so they have to put it into a jar. So the jar is bottled to the pickles. And the ikka is the pickles, it's not a jar, l'shem jar. You want to make it a jar now, l'shem jar. So when did it become a jar, l'shem jar? In the shus by you. So Melis, it's a keli that a yid made. And while the yid made it, you don't need tefillah. This is a popular heter from Rav Moshe.
When he took out the pickles, he made the Keilim.
Once you took out the pickles and you want to use it for other, you made it a jar.
You made the Keilim.
You made it like a container, a shem container. So I tell you again, there's other people that don't agree with him, but even the people that don't agree sometimes to his psakim have respect for him. Nobody like start up with Ungarish. There was one person that wrote a sefer against Rav Moshe. We have the sefer someplace in the shul. I can find it. A big sefer. His name was Schwartz, and he made a sefer called Minor Ligoras or the Igros. Minor answer to the Igros. He lived in Flatbush. He didn't send his children to yeshiva. He himself learned with his children, kind of Nungash Yid, but he wanted his children to learn English, so I had them as students in Ocean Parkway. They came just in the afternoon for English. But he wrote, but you see, there are tshuvas in Igros Moshe where people wrote ideas where they want to question the Psak of Rav Moshe. But when they did it, they apologized. And Rav Moshe answers them back and says, you don't have to apologize. It's tighter, and you have a right to question. And he defends himself. Whatever Psak Rav Moshe Paskin, he always defended it. He wasn't afraid to defend it. There was once a whole tumult, years ago, I remember yet when there was a tumult with artificial insemination. To help people to give birth. So they would take the zera from a person and they would inject it into the woman. And that was called artificial insemination. Rav Moshe was martyred. It's a getummelt of Welt. A lot of people were against it, but he defended his psak. He not only defended his psak, but that artificial insemination is the child's a mamza. The Moshe said no. A mamza is only if it's derech bia. If there was no actual bia, it's not a mamza. But he said an interesting thing in one of his psakim. He said the shagu was a woman wanted to give birth, and her husband couldn't help her to give birth. So she went and she got an artificial insemination. So the shagu was now that she said the child is not a mamza because it wasn't that of bia. But there's a question if the husband is mechuyev to support the child, it's not his child. Or does he have to pay chalimut for the child? But as far as the child, he paskin that he could even marry a kayin. It's in Eben Ezra, it's a famous tshuva for Rav Moshe. I'll give you just an example.
Is that the accepted halacha?
If people don't want it, that's their business. There was a Rav in Eretz Yisrael by the name of Eliezer Waldenberg. Eliezer made 20 odds for him in halacha, and there's certain things that he argued with the Moshe, but in this thing he was more certain things he's more makel. Moshe, there was a question today. The bachim or the girls, when they come to marital age, they go to an organization called Deri Sharm in order to find out if there's compatibility over there. Of Moshe, let's say if there's not compatibility, so then they can give birth to a child. They call it Tay-sex. So Moshe, the question: could you do an abortion? So the Tzitzel, he has a paskin, you could do an abortion even in the 7th month. And the Moshe writes that it's a tzicha. I mean, Panamo, that he was the big machman, he was the mekel, and the certain things where Tzitzel Yezer was the machman, and the Moshe was the mekel.
But he was mekel because they discovered the disease?
Huh?
Or he was mekel because they discovered the disease?
The doctors discovered the disease, so the question is, till when could you do an abortion? If it's before 40 days, according to everyone, you can do an abortion.
You probably can't discover the disease then.
Huh?
You probably can't discover the disease at that early stage.
I don't know. I'm just telling you that's why the Moshe writes that you should go for the test and everything. I'm just giving you examples. So getting back to Keilim, what we're talking about, that he has this chiddush that the Keilim became a Keilim b'shus Yisrael. Okay, let's see another Keilim. Imhu klei yoshen, shenishtamesh b'yavi k'cham. This was the month, yes. That if it's a Keilim that a guy used, and people sometimes buy, in the street, they have a garage sale, where people take out all the things that they had in the garage, There's people that come by and they buy these things, Some for collecting, some because they want to buy it. So, ba'ayfish is sort of herrscher behagola oilibim, that let's say if it's a metal pot, it could need need a lieben. If it's another type of pot, it may need a goal. One is lieben means glowing in fire, which there's two types of lieben. I explained that already. There's one is lieben gomer and one is lieben kal. So if it's such a keli, tzrichen lachshira mikaydim v'achakach l'tova. And after that, first you have to make it kosher, and after you make it kosher, it still has the tumah of the guy, so you have to table it in order to bring it into the reshus of your soul. Let's see one more sif. Im shol or sacher kelim b'yikacham. If someone borrowed or rented, the caterers many times rent kelim. They have a party. Let's say the caterers prepared for 100 couples, 200 couples. But what happens if there's a party with, let's say, a few hundred couples? It's a shluchim convention. You need kelim for 1,000 people. So they rent kelim. So he said that if you borrowed or if you rented a kelim from a guy, einam tzrichen tefillah, then you don't need tefillah. V'im shol or sacher kelim mechem b'nei Yisrael, but if there's a Yiddish place where to rent the kelim from, let's say a storekeeper. So the storekeeper, the front of the store, he has kelim that he sells, and he has kelim that he rents out. So tzrichen tefillah b'lei bracha. Over there, being that you're not really the owner, so you need tefillah. But it was a Yid's Keilim. So b'shas, really the Yid should have tabled it. But if a Yid is running a store, has a hardware store where he sells Keilim, he doesn't have to table because he's not using them. He has it specifically for sale. But if he's renting it out, then it becomes a little different. It's like his that he's renting out. So he says you need tefillah b'lei bracha. V'achem v'niyadiyah zois l'misha yitnach akach. He says that the storekeeper, when he sells the kelim that are used, that he rented out, maybe sells at a discount. So the one that's buying it may want to go and table it. So he says he should notify the people that this kelim you don't have to table because I already tabled it. Otherwise, if you wouldn't notify the people, in all good intentions, they'll go table it and they'll make a bracha. So that's why he says you have to notify him that you shouldn't. Okay, stuff that is not minded, but.